Welcome to Torah for today, April 11th, 2024, and with our wonderful group of students who are joining us for some learning. I am looking forward to sharing with you. How many of you went outside to look at the solar eclipse? All right. All right. Did you have the special glasses to do it and everything?
Yep.
Yeah. What were your feelings, those of you who saw it?
Well, it was kind of amazing, but I think as a child I saw one.
Okay. Anybody else?
It's interesting. I forgot to go look at it. And when Mike mentioned it, I said, you know what? I have a very vivid memory of the one I saw when I was a child in Israel. And we had a glass store, a person that did glass. And he gave us, all the children, he gave us the dark kind of glass to work with. So, yeah, sorry we missed it.
Yeah, Anita?
I saw the one, went to Oregon, what was it, in 17, I think. And it was incredible, the quietness that occurred at the full eclipse. And we got some incredible pictures because my husband had a telescope that he fitted out with filters. And so we had some beautiful pictures from that one. So knowing that I had seen that, a partial wouldn't have been as good.
Yeah, it's so, go ahead, Judy. Yeah.
I saw the partial and it was cool, but I understand you were in Texas and you saw the
Yeah.
whole deal with getting dark and everything.
Yeah, no, it was something quite remarkable. Anita was talking about 2017 in Oregon, and one of my sons who lives in Seattle, three of my kids now live there, but he went to Oregon to see the full eclipse. And Judy, that's when he said to us, he goes, "All right, we're going to Texas in 2024 as a family." And so he about 6 months ago, sent an email saying, "Okay, who's going?" So we all, three of the kids went. And look, the connection here, there's a couple of connections, and we're gonna look at solar eclipses in terms of Bible and of and Talmud. What did the rabbis think about these solar eclipses? And I think it fits into our narrative of the of Passover, right? Because one explanation of darkness, of the plague of darkness, was that it was a solar eclipse. And so, it was fascinating. So Judy, we because you can't plan so far in the future in terms of where the best place is going to be. So we decided we wanted to be in Austin, which is going to be a great place. The only problem is to fly into Austin was very expensive because everybody was flying into Austin. So we ended up flying into Houston and had to drive all the way to Austin. And then to find out that the weather was going to be very cloudy in Austin. And it wasn't going to be the ideal place. And we were walking around the city. And so on Monday, now, by the way, I want you to know this is not my initiative or Rhodey's. This is only our children. It was like we were storm chasers deciding where's the best place to go, where there'll be, very, very high visibility. There's a lot of cloud cover in Texas and some inclement weather. And so we woke up Monday morning. I won't even tell you what time we woke up, but we left the house at 4:30 a.m. And we were prepared to drive as far as Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas, which would have been about a 9-hour drive. Luckily, we got to Dallas and things were clearing up. And so we went to Arlington. but it was really quite the experience. And what Anita experienced in 2017, I'll share a little bit of that as well. But I want to put it in the context of, how did the ancient people look at these solar eclipses in the Bible? And then how did the rabbis understand them as well? So that's what we're going to do together. Eileen.
I just have a question. Wasn't there something about an eclipse having to do with Joshua, even though they don't say it's an eclipse?
No, because, that was
That
the
the sun
standing
stood
still of the
still?
sun.
The
With
sun,
Joshua, it was standing still as well. And I don't think that there's an eclipse there, but we'll look at that. Lauren, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, so my son is a teacher, and there were kids in his class that did not come to school because they're Hispanic, and there's a lot of superstition involved with eclipses. And one of them is like, if you're out in an eclipse, it'll render you infertile. So they did not send their children to school. And my friend's daughter is a teacher at a predominantly Hispanic school. There were like over 100 kids absent the day of the eclipse.
Wow.
So who knew? I mean, I didn't know. So it's interesting. So I was talking to my friend's daughter. I said, well, look at all the superstitions we have. Like you don't prepare for a baby's room. You tie red ribbons around everything. You do it because someone told you to. So these parents kept their children home because someone told them that if you're out in an eclipse, your children will be infertile. They won't be able to have children one day.
I have never heard that before. That is fascinating. Wow. Stan?
We watched on TV from classes where they were showing the total eclipse on the mountain that's behind it there. And that was, even more spectacular in the way that, and more towards the way that that we think of the things in the Bible too, with the mountain in the background.
Yeah, it was so interesting. If you want, when we're done studying today, if you want, you can look for videos. I would encourage you videos of at the Dallas Zoo and the Little Rock, Arkansas Zoo. And they had special programs on that day for the eclipse, in which to experience what would happen to the animals. And it's fascinating what happened during the total eclipse. And the total eclipse was somewhere in many places, if you had to be right on the direct line, between 3 to 4 minutes, which was really, it's quite a long time to have a total eclipse like that. But let's look at some of the biblical sources and let's see what they have to say. And then we'll study together. All right. So this first one is from the book of Amos. All right, chapter 4, verse 13. Eileen, would you like to read?
okay. Behold, he who formed the mountains and created the wind and has told man what his wish is, who turns daybreak into blackness and treads upon places of the earth. His name is the Lord, the God of hosts.
All right. So what is, right? Who turns daybreak into blackness? So obviously, is there any other, explanation for other than a solar eclipse?
Well, nighttime.
Well, but
At night.
right, but who turns daybreak into blackness? It doesn't say into night, right? Because we have those lines, and in the prayer that we talk about, who rolls light into dark and dark into light. But this is about darkness itself. Let's go on to, this is, by the way, also the book of Amos, prophet. Go ahead, Eileen.
And in that day, declares my Lord God, I will make the sun set at noon. I will darken the earth on a sunny day. Why was he saying all this? What happened previously?
So in that day, so here's what's going to be happening. But Yom Hahu, on that day, what is that day?
Well, what was before all of this? What made him come and to say that this is what's going to happen?
So We're going to get there. What is Bayom Hahu? That day. That
You
day
would think
is the
it's the
Lord.
day
Go ahead, Leora.
It sounds like the day of creation of the light, of Shnei HaMeorot.
Oh, that's interesting. Bayom Hahu, to think about creation. Bayom Hahu, by the way, you have an Aleinu. Bayom Hahu, Yeh Adonai Echad, Ushemo, Shemo Echad. On that day, God's name will be one. God will be one, and God's name will be one. So what is that Bayom Hahu? George, what is it?
Beats me, but I'm looking at the art scroll and they have a comment by Rashi. It's a metaphor for sudden disaster during prosperous times. So that's totally, a different look
Yeah,
at
that's a
it.
different take. That is a different take. Anita, what do you think Bayom Hahu is?
The Messiah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That day, the apocalypse,
Yeah.
the coming of the Messianic era, that is the day when, right, when we will all people will turn towards God. So that seems to be the Bayom Hahu.
But,
All right. Go ahead, Eileen.
but that doesn't say that. That says that it will be dark, like it would be a punishment.
Ah, so hold on to that idea about the question is it a good sign or a bad sign of the Messianic era? The apocalypse, by the way, before it gets better, Eileen, is supposed to be not so great, right? You have
I don't think there is a Messiah, but in any
no,
event.
but even the rabbinic tradition, there's the war of Gog and Magog that will take place. It's an apocalyptic fight between the forces of good and evil.
And evil.
Exactly. So there's much that has to occur before there's actually what we call the better half of the Messianic era. All right. Let's go. I'm gonna give you one more, Eileen, from also
Okay.
from the Book of Amos.
Ah, you who wish for the day of the Lord, why should you want the day of the Lord? It shall be darkness, not light, as if a man should run from a lion and be attacked by a bear, or if he got indoors, should lean his hand on the wall and be bitten by a snake. Surely the day of the Lord shall be not light, but darkness, black as night without a glimmer.
Right. So Eileen, that's your opinion. It seems to be negative. Why would you want this darkness?
I mean, it sounds like they're being it's a punishment for something.
Okay, good. Anybody, any other thoughts about, yes, Judy?
I read a bunch of stuff that said that people might turn around during the eclipse and find more peace in their lives and stuff like that. Did you see anything like this?
To do what? I missed that last part.
People might come together due to the eclipse, and that it would be a really have a positive effect. But I talked to my daughter today, who's a therapist, and she said that ever since her clients have had so many issues. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's a whole theory about the impact of whether it's astrological signs, whether it's the moon, the sun, and you're dealing with both issues at the same time, the moon and the sun, when you're dealing with the solar eclipse. So absolutely, that could be it. Stan?
Wasn't the plague of darkness, though, one that the Jews did not see the dark or did not witness the dark? It was only those. So it's hard to imagine that as a natural event. Of course, the Jews were in a slightly different area, but still.
Yeah, Stan, right. So the Torah clearly expresses these as supernatural events, the plagues. But then there's an attempt to explain them in terms of scientific understandings, and so it's how one portrays the experience, Stan. Right? So they don't negate each other, but they give their different reflections. Sorry, the pun of an event. One being the astronomical, and the other being the spiritual. Steve.
You mentioned the the eclipse, there was an article in today's New York Times, which the headline was "Wonder at the Eclipse in a Moment of Unity." It's in today's New York Times, and it talks about how everyone had this sense of awe and the impression that it made on their senses.
Yeah, I definitely think it's true. I think there was a sense of people, my experience was of people being really focused on the event, Steve, and somehow a reflective moment for everybody, which is a good thing. All right, let's keep going.
Oh,
And yeah, oh, George, go ahead.
yeah, I'm looking at the art scroll again. The comment on line 18, Yom Hashem is, they believe it's the day of judgment. And then on line 19, so too on the day of judgment, one tragedy will come upon the heels of the other. So just,
Right. So the judgment part, right? The judgment part is the beginning of the Messianic era, George. Correct. So
Okay.
thank you for making sure that is clear to everybody. What we call the Messianic era begins with that day of judgment, when evil is what's the word I'm looking for? When evil is punished, right? The good will survive, and then we'll end up with a Messianic era. And that's why, Eileen, it makes sense. At the beginning, who wants to be there? It's going to be dark and ugly. And this was their understanding. All right, let's go to, Nancy, go ahead.
When they made the metaphor about the animals running from the animals or being attacked, is it saying that people should to make people avoid it or run from it, or
no, it's here. It's all this idea as if a man should run from a lion and be attacked by a bear. That is, you're running from a lion, from life, the world, and you're going towards this Messianic era, right? Day of judgment. But in truth, you're really going to be, it's like being attacked by a bear this day of judgment. Right? It wasn't a good thing. You might have been running away from a lion, but now you are being attacked by a bear. They're both bad. That's all. Nancy, will you continue reading now, Isaiah?
Lo, the day of the Lord is coming with pitiless fury and wrath, to make the earth a desolation, to wipe out the sinners upon it. The stars and the constellations of heaven shall not give off their light.
Keep going.
The sun shall be dark when it rises, and the moon shall diffuse no glow.
All right. So these are the signs of this day of judgment, the day by Yom HaHu, the day of the Lord, and the sinners will be wiped out. All right. There are lots of other quotes here from 2 Kings. I'm not going to. I think I'm going to skip these. This is interesting. The one from 2 Kings. All right, Nancy, why don't you keep reading?
Okay, Isaiah replied, "This is a sign for you from the Lord, that the Lord will do the thing that he has promised. Shall the shadow advance 10 steps or recede 10 steps?"
All right, the shadow here, by the way, is the shadow of time. Right? Think about, what do you call it? When you tell time on the ground. What is that?
Sundial.
A sundial. So think about a sundial. Thank you, George. And is the shadow, is it going to advance quickly, or is it going to back up? Which way is that shade going to go? Keep going.
Hezekiah said, "It is easy for the shadow to lengthen 10 steps, but not for the shadow to recede 10 steps."
Right, Nancy, does that make sense? It's easier for it, right? It's easier for something to move faster, but not to go backwards.
Right.
Okay, keep going.
So the prophet Isaiah called to the Lord, and he made the shadow which had descended on the dial of Ahaz recede 10 steps.
So this was a sign, Eileen, of God, right? Being called upon, and actually time went backwards, if you will. The sun moved backwards in terms of time. All right, let's go on. Bob, are you up for reading? You have to unmute though.
You guys can't read lips? The biblical account relates that Isaiah the prophet was sent to Hezekiah to inform him that he would die from his illness. Hezekiah prayed for healing, and Isaiah had not left the palace when he was sent back to the king with a different message. The Lord would heal him and give him another 15 years of life. A sign was to confirm the healing. The shadow could move forward or backward on an outdoor stairway. Hezekiah chose for the shadow to move backward.
Right. So those are the steps that they're talking about, much like the sun, like the comparison of a sundial, but in fact, it would go backwards to those 10 steps. Keep going, Bob.
On March 5 in 702 BCE, the 16th year before Hezekiah's death, a prominent solar eclipse appeared over the Middle East, according to NASA. Its path crossed the Arabian Peninsula, and the obscuration of the sun over Israel was more than 60%. If a stairway had been engulfed in darkness and then restored to light, the shadow would have appeared to retreat. A shadow wave produced by an eclipse may also have given the appearance of a shadow retreating.
So, Bob, interesting. They're trying to explain this bit from Hezekiah's time and Isaiah from an actual solar eclipse that was experienced at that time.
Okay.
All right.
You're not just calling it a miracle.
Correct. So, and now so hold on. Let's go. So here, I mean, when you're snuffed out, I will cover the sky, darkens its stars. I'll cover the sun with clouds, and the moon shall not give its light. These are all continue. I want to get to the rabbinic sources. Here we go. So, Bob, this is from the Talmud, from the section of Sukkah, which talks about Sukkot. And they're going to start with talking about Sukkot, and then we're going to get to the solar eclipse. So go ahead.
Apropos the fact that rain on Sukkot is an indication of divine rebuke, the Gemara cites several related topics. The sages taught, when the sun is eclipsed, it is a bad omen for the entire world. The Gemara tells a parable. To what is this matter comparable? It is comparable to a king of flesh and blood who prepared a feast for his servants and placed a lantern before them to illuminate the hall. He became angry at them and said to his servant, "Take the lantern from before them and set them in darkness."
All right. So what is this saying? So Steve's like going, what is this? But the first line, apropos of the fact that rain on Sukkot is an indication of divine rebuke. When, according to rabbinic tradition, when are we judged for rain? George, on Sukkot, correct?
Yeah. We changed the prayer.
We changed the prayer, but when do we change the Mashiv HaRuach Morid HaGashim? What day of Sukkot?
Is the 8th or something?
The final day of Sukkot.
Yeah.
Okay, on Shmini Atzeret.
Yeah.
So why is it divine rebuke to rain on Sukkot, the first 7 days of Sukkot?
The harvest, probably.
What, Stan?
Well, I think it's because you have to be outdoors, like in the rain.
So you're supposed to be in the Sukkah, Stan, and you're supposed to enjoy it. If it's raining, you're supposed to go inside. And so they saw this as a sign of divine rebuke that God didn't want you to be in the Sukkah.
Yeah.
So now, look at this. The sages taught when the sun is eclipsed is a bad omen for the entire world. All right? It's always, when they have these stories and parables, God, of course, is always the king. And he prepares a banquet, he puts light, but then he takes away the light. And so that is why it is seen as being divine rebuke. Any thoughts about this at all? Steve, anything? Anybody? No? Good. Okay, let's keep going then. Kathleen, would you like to read?
It is taught in a Bereta that Rabbi Meir says, when the heavenly lights, the sun and the moon are eclipsed, it is a bad omen for the enemies of the Jewish people, which is a euphemism for the Jewish people because they are experienced in their beatings. Based on past experience, they assume that any calamity that afflicts the world is directed at them. The Gemara suggests a parable. This is similar to a teacher who comes to the school with a strap in his hand. Who worries? The child who is accustomed to be beaten every day is the one who worries.
Boy, this is a very, very deep teaching. All right. I want you, Kathleen, I want you to read it one more time, and then I'm gonna take it off the screen. And I want you to, what is this? What's being said about the Jewish people, and what does that mean then when they apply that to seeing the solar eclipse? So read it one more time.
It is taught in a Baraita that Rabbi Meir says, when the heavenly lights, that is the sun and the moon, are eclipsed, it is a bad omen for the enemies of the Jewish people, which is a euphemism for the Jewish people because they are experienced in their beatings. Based on past experience, they assume that any calamity that afflicts the world is directed at them. The Gemara suggests a parable. This is similar to a teacher who comes to the school with a strap in his hand. Who worries? The child who is accustomed to being beaten each and every day is the one who worries.
All right. So what is this Gemara teaching or suggesting?
It
Go ahead, Eileen.
it suggests that the enemies of Israel or the Jewish people, when that occurs, they'll be punished.
That who's the they are going to be punished?
Whatever the enemies are, not the Jewish people.
No, I think it says the Jewish people.
No, it doesn't.
Steve, how do you understand it?
I understand it that and this, to me, it's consistent from my readings of Isaiah and other prophets who rail about the people's failures and failure to follow God's teachings and so forth. That we're used to it, and we're going to get beaten, and you better realize you're going to get beaten.
Right. So Eileen, the fact that it's bad for the whole world really means whatever bad for the whole world is going to be bad is bad for the Jews, because the whole world is going to take it out on us. Right, Steve? Isn't that how you read it? Anita.
Just what you just said, when there was the Black Death or anything goes wrong, anti-Semitism, it comes up. So even in the pandemic, there was more anti-Semitism. I mean, it's just when something is wrong in the world, the Jews get blamed.
Now remember, the Talmud goes back. We assume that the Babylonian Talmud is finished about the year 500 CE. So we're talking about, Anita, that early on, that the Jewish people have this self-impression that they, right, when things are bad, that they're going to suffer. Any other thoughts about this? Steve?
Just the fact that we now understand eclipses has it's good, because the latest eclipse might have encouraged more anti-Semitism. That I haven't heard. So we've got enough anti-Semitism right now, and due to other facts as opposed to eclipses.
Well, yes. Yeah, we don't need any more anti-Semitism. We've got enough. By the way, what are the conditions? We didn't talk about this for a solar eclipse, right? What do you have to have, especially I think a total solar eclipse, but any solar eclipse? What do you need?
The moon has to be in line and passing the sun.
Okay. What else? Anybody else know? What day? Monday, Tuesday. What day was it in the Jewish calendar?
Rosh Chodesh?
It was Rosh Chodesh, Steve.
Right.
Which means what kind of moon was it, Steve?
It's a new moon.
New moon.
A solar eclipse, I found out, has to happen. It happens on a new moon.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating? It's going to line up. Yes, Stan, go ahead.
One more general question. You used it the term Messianic age or Messianic era. I thought that that was a more, let's say, modern explanation of things and wasn't used by the rabbis in that form when we were talking about the things that will happen in those days. They talked about a coming of Messiah, but they didn't. I didn't think that they used that particular phrase or the translation of that as an era.
They would say the days of the Messiah rather than a messianic era. That part is true. Right? And I use the more contemporary kind of designation. So yes, so thank you for clarifying the expression itself. All right, let's go on. Hold on to another source. And Judy, you want to read? You haven't read yet. You have to unmute. Yeah.
I'll try. I'm a little hoarse.
Oh, you sure? We can have someone else read if you want.
Okay.
All right, George, you want to read?
Okay. If during an eclipse the vidges of the sun is red like blood, it is an omen that sword, meaning war, is coming to the world. The sun is black like sackcloth made of dark goat hair, is an omen that arrows of hunger are coming to the world because hunger darkens people's faces. When it's similar to both of these, to blood and to that of sackcloth, is a sign that both sword and arrows of hunger are coming to the world. If it was eclipsed upon its entry soon after rising, it is an omen that calamity is tearing to come. If the sun is eclipsed upon its departure at the end of the day, it's an omen that calamity is hastening to come. And some say that matters are reversed. Well, that doesn't tell us much. Some say this, some say that. Okay. An eclipse early in the morning is an omen that calamity is hastening, while an eclipse in the late afternoon is an omen that calamity is tarrying. Okay.
Yeah. So now, right. So what is this now? It's trying to get more specific. That the eclipse itself can be read in terms of, when I say read, R-E-A-D, can be read or understood based on the different types of images that you might see in the eclipse, can actually tell you what kind of danger is coming. When you were, Anita, when you saw the full solar eclipse and you looked up, what did you see specifically when it was a full eclipse?
It was a full eclipse. I saw the ring of light surrounding the blackness of the moon.
Right. And what did you see beyond?
No color.
Right. What did you see beyond? Well, there was no color beyond the moon itself?
I didn't see any color beyond the moon itself, just the ring of white light.
It's so interesting because we experienced, and my son, who's into this, who was the one who saw it in Oregon, said that you can see solar flares or the likes that you normally can't see. In fact, there was an article, Steve, about seeing red dots in it. And we could see there's like a couple red dots around it. You could see some solar flares that's beyond the circle. And it really had a distinctive look to it. What else? All right, let's go on to, we're gonna go back and then we'll bring this all together. Come on, let's share that screen again. All right. Let's go on. Stan, did you read yet?
No.
The sages taught.
The sages taught that on account of 4 matters, the sun is eclipsed. On account of a president of the court who dies and is not eulogized appropriately, and the eclipse is a type of eulogy by heaven. On account of a betrothed young woman who screamed in the city that she was being raped, and there was no one to rescue her on account of homosexuality and on account of two brothers whose blood was spilled as one.
All right, so Stan, they're taking a different direction here, correct?
Yes.
more than national catastrophes or international catastrophes, these are much more reflective of a singular event, correct?
Or, family kinds of things, or yes, government kinds of
Right.
things.
Well, the two brothers we're going to get to in one moment. What does it mean? The two brothers whose blood was spilled as one. All right. So here's the Akedat Yitzchak. Why don't you read this, Stan?
Akedat Yitzchak explains that solar eclipse really refers to the death of the righteous, the lights of our community who are extinguished. Yesod Olam goes in the other direction.
Okay, that's a different commentary. Go ahead.
He understands the 4 seasons for a solar eclipse as allegories for the movement of the moon. For example, the two brothers who die refer to the sun and the moon, who both lose their light, so to speak, during a solar eclipse.
Right. The Ramah Isserlis.
Ramah offers a different allegorical interpretation, connecting the 4 reasons to the movements of the astrological signs relating to a solar eclipse.
Okay.
TorahMusings.com.
All right. So, and here's another one, trying to understand what the solar eclipse means. And let's go. Steve, you haven't read, have you? Why don't you read?
Sure. And on account of 4 matters, the heavenly lights are eclipsed. On account of forgers of a fraudulent document, pilaster, that is intended to discredit others. On account of testifiers of false testimony. On account of raisers of small domesticated animals in Eretz Yisrael in a settled area. And on account of choppers of good fruit-producing trees.
All right. So again, Steve, these are all in the same tractate of Sukkah, and they're trying to give different explanations for the eclipse. So how's this one a little bit different?
I guess it's relating to other events that go on in a community and experiences that people have.
Yeah, when people commit, evil, when they do bad acts, there's an impact, and the eclipse is a sign that people are sinning in these particular areas, which they considered really bad. Right? Forging of a fraudulent document, the idea that you can't trust commerce or business. Testifiers of false testimony, you can't trust testimony in a court of law.
Well,
Raisers of, go ahead.
I was going to comment. One of the things I find to relate to this is that the eclipse had to be full, I would think, for ancient man to even notice the eclipse, right? So it's even
why?
Because without full darkness, how would they know?
So they knew about partial eclipses, absolutely. The full total eclipse was something that's the Biyom Hahu. On that day, there'll be darkness. But they did know about other eclipses as well. Right? That's for sure. Continue now. The Mishnah Brura. Continue this reading, Steve.
Sure. The Mishnah Berura rules that it is forbidden to tell another person that a rainbow is visible, because this violates the prohibition of slander.
Mm-hmm.
Since it appears as a sign of human sin, it might be suggested that that's Daba.
Right.
It would also be forbidden to announce the time of a future solar eclipse. However, unlike a rainbow, a solar eclipse may be entirely predicted. And on the basis of this, Rabbi
Avigdor Nebenzal
ruled that it is permitted to publicize the dates and times of a future eclipse.
Yeah, there's a whole thing about what rainbows and why they're there. There's actually a blessing over a rainbow. Everybody knows that.
Wasn't the rainbow assigned to Noah?
It was a covenant.
Keanu, is it?
And yet, because there's this idea about sharing with a rainbow, and I don't want to get into it now because I want to get into the solar eclipse part, because the question's going to become difference between I want to establish a rainbow and an eclipse. The rainbow, you have a blessing, but there's no blessing for an eclipse.
That seems logical because apparently the eclipse is associated with bad things.
Ah, there you go. All right, so just keep reading now. Steve, take one more. Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, right? The last Chabad rabbi.
There is a well-established principle that it is forbidden to institute a blessing that is not mentioned in the Talmud. And some say that the reason that no blessing was instituted is because the eclipse is a bad omen. To the contrary, it is important to pray for the omen to be annulled and to cry out without a bracha.
Isn't that interesting? Let's see. All right, I'm going to take it off this for now.
Abba, I have a question.
Yeah, please, Leora.
Taking us back to what they were talking about, the blood of the two brothers, the brothers. I didn't understand that part, if you can.
Oh, well, they're talking about two brothers that shed blood on the same day, that two brothers kill each other. I mean, literally, there's nothing worse than having, two sons. And then another one took it metaphorically about the sun and the moon.
Okay.
Hold on, I'm trying to see, based on the time we have, what... Let me see here. I want to skip a little bit. All right, so let me go here. Hold on. All right, I'm gonna go back and share again and share. All right, we're gonna go from the Maharal. All right, explains. Is there anybody that hasn't read that wants to read? Anybody that hasn't read wants to read? Bob, why don't you read again? You did such a great job.
Maharal explains that the Gemara is offering reasons why God established nature in such a way that there would be solar eclipses. If people did not sin, we would merit eternal light. However, because God knew people would sin, he created the world in such a way that solar eclipses would happen.
Isn't that interesting? Right? So the nature of the world, God knows that we're going to sin. And so it is the eclipses. He's accepting the negative connotations of that. Go ahead, Bob, continue.
Some authorities believe that the Gemara is not talking about solar eclipses. Rob Jonasson.
Ibschutz.
Ibschutz,
yeah.
Suggests that the Gemara is referring to sunspots. While solar eclipses can be predicted, sunspots cannot and are caused by sin. Rav Yehosef
Schwartz
suggests that the Gemara is discussing unexpected atmospheric phenomena. He says that on 28 Iyar, 1838 in Jerusalem at 4 p.m., the sun turned dark red for about an hour. Everyone was amazed by the sight. Over the next 3 months, Jerusalem experienced a terrible plague with many deaths. Rav Schwartz says that this was an example of the Talmudic phenomenon.
So they're trying to make sense of these like solar events, if you will. All right, Steve, will you continue?
And they have been created, as Moses tells us, not only that they might send light upon the earth, but also that they might display signs of future events. For either by their risings or their settings or their eclipses, or again by their appearances and occultations, or by other variations observable in their motions, men oftentimes conjecture what is about to happen. The productiveness or unproductiveness of the crops, the birth or loss of their cattle, fine weather or cloudy weather, calm and violent storms of wind, floods in the rivers or droughts, a tranquil state of the sea and heavy waves, unusual changes in the seasons of the year, when either the summer is cold like winter or the winter warm, or when the spring assumes the temperature of autumn or the autumn that of spring. And before now, some men have conjecturally predicted disturbances and commotions of the earth from the revolutions of the heavenly bodies and innumerable other events which have turned out most exactly true, so that it is a most veracious saying that the stars were created to act as signs, and moreover to mark the seasons. And by the word seasons, the divisions of the year are here intended. And why may not this be reasonably affirmed? For what other idea of opportunity can there be except that it is the time for success? And the seasons bring everything to perfection and set everything right, giving perfection to the sowing and planting of fruits and to the birth and growth of animals.
All right. So what's trying to be suggested about the role of the of eclipses or sunspots and life in general? Anything you want to, and I want to tie, and then I want to look at for a moment the difference between a partial eclipse and a full solar eclipse. So first of all, what is that saying, Steve? Did you understand in terms of?
I mean, things are connected. That maybe our knowledge today of the way the universe works, way the solar system works, undercuts that a bit, because we understand more fully the reality of astronomy. But I could understand why ancient men would try to see connection among certain cycles versus surprise events.
Right. But even if there's signs, so even if you take today, Steve, and others, I'd love to hear from everybody else. How could we understand these signs today, even though we understand them in terms of the astronomy and the if you will, the physics of it? What are these signs supposed to be telling us?
I mean, I see it as the difference between ancient man and modern man.
Okay. What could modern man still learn from it, George?
Well, I was just thinking, there's another issue too, is that Ein Mazel LeYisrael. In other words, we're not ruled by the heavenly bodies. Israel isn't.
Yeah, it's interesting though. George, do the rabbis believe that we are influenced by the heavenly stars?
Well, there's stuff in there,
In fact, George, what does Mazal Tov mean?
Yeah, the stars and the whole bit. Yeah.
Right. May your constellation be a good one.
Yeah, sure.
And did you know that,
Oh,
Eileen?
now you say it about
No.
it's a different meaning, but
in other words, that whatever star you're born under should be good.
Well, the mazalot are the constellations.
Yeah.
So you say Mazel Tov, may you have a good constellation or star.
Yeah.
Okay, and they did believe in astrology, George. How do we know they believed in astrology?
We've seen synagogues with astrological signs.
That's right, Stan. They had all the zodiac signs in many synagogues, including at what is Masada.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we know, but George, the difference is you can't determine the future based on your stars. It just happens, right? You can't determine the future. It just means that you're influenced by the mazalot. Yeah, Stan.
Well, I think there's another thing we can learn. It may not be exactly what we're talking about here, but an eclipse or some unusual, let's say, natural event calls people attention to the way the world is and the majesty, or whatever you want to call it, of creation, and putting God into the picture, whereas it happens every day. The more majesty is the way that we have everyday world, and we don't think about it. We don't appreciate it to the same extent that we think about things when there's an unusual aspect to it.
All right, so good. So that's a great segue to my final question. What is the difference then in the experience between a partial to a full eclipse? Aside from what one you see, everything covered, and then the other one you don't. I want you to, like, what is the difference? Because some of you saw a partial eclipse the other day. Yeah, Steve?
I mean, one of the challenges, though, between ancient man and today is ancient man, I don't think, was able to see most of the partial eclipses because they didn't have glasses to protect their eyes. They would just stare up, see it would still be mostly sun, and they turn away, which is instinctive to self-protection.
Yeah, good. Bob?
I think it's one's perspective, what you're seeing. If I'm standing in location A and I'm looking at a fixed object, and someone else is standing in location B and looking at that same fixed object. We're seeing it from different perspectives, and it's going to appear differently to each of us.
Interesting. It will be. Everybody has a unique perspective. So here's what I experienced. What's interesting. And I've seen partial eclipses before, is that when you have a partial eclipse, you're completely focused on the heavens. Everything is upward. And Steve, you're right. You need glasses, but they were able to, by the way, through shadows, to experience it on the ground. Right? They without looking at it, you could turn, and they had ways of doing it. In fact, I don't know if you know, when we were in Texas, did any of you see, like, they actually have these boxes you can put together where if you put it down and it'll show the shadow of it.
Yeah.
But
yes.
but they didn't get foreknowledge like we have.
Right.
I mean, they weren't told, hey, there's an eclipse coming. It was
correct
without warning.
No, that is true. But and by the way, this is a difference between even a 99% eclipse and a total eclipse. When there's 99% eclipse, it still doesn't get dark on the earth. The sun is so powerful that even if it's 99% covered, it's only that last percent where it begins to get dark on earth. And it was, and Eileen, it was fascinating. All of a sudden, the last like 30 seconds, where really daytime, just like described in the Bible, begins to turn into dusk. And everything just started to get dark very quickly, that last percent. And then Steve stayed that way for about the 3 minutes of the total eclipse. And that was a moment in which you weren't focused on the heavens only, you were focused on earth as well. And it was fascinating because you began to look around and it just felt different. If you look at the videos of the zoos, what do you think? How do you think animals responded?
They went to sleep.
Well, like those animals that are actually nocturnal began to actually change, right, and get ready for their nocturnal practices.
Right.
There was, I think the apes who go out, I think at night even, they began to take a posture of protection, and they circled to protect themselves with the eclipse. And other animals were running, and it really threw them off in terms of what of their own instinctive actions. And I really thought for the first time, I'm telling you that it's not just partial eclipses, and Anita, this is, you can verify as well. You're completely focused, right? You're focused up above.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came to when you saw in Oregon, right? Didn't everything change around you?
Absolutely. And one of the funny things is that we were in a residential area and there were automatic lighting.
Mm.
And it was all these people's lights started coming on because it had gotten dark enough to trigger all these residential lights. So that was funny. The other thing is there were a bunch of bees in some sage behind me, and there was constant buzzing, and then suddenly it was quiet.
Yeah.
The bees
yeah, go ahead.
Didn't buzz around for that 2 minutes or 3 minutes.
Yeah. And yet, by the way, I heard, it wasn't my experience, but there were people told me that they heard the crickets start to make their noise during the eclipse.
I wasn't near crickets, so.
Yeah, I wasn't as well. Stan, go ahead.
Another thing, we were talking about animals earlier, and it's bad. It was bad for the Israelites, the Jews, to have domesticated small animals in a populated area, which is basically saying pets. I mean, I don't know what they had in the way of a concept of pets there, but now we look at them in a totally different perspective. That's another modern.
Yeah, no, it's this idea about the plague of darkness and what does it mean in terms of understanding it as a sign. The idea that how are we supposed to look at events that the Talmud's trying to make sense of what a solar eclipse is about. And I think as everybody, as you all experience, when you're directed towards, Steve, I think you said this phenomenon, right? That somehow you change what your thinking is about. You're looking for meaning. And I think that's what it was whether it's the ancient world or today, Steve, the idea of looking for meaning and trying to understand what can we learn from it, from this unusual event that everybody is experiencing together all around you in a unique way. That, I believe, is part of what the solar eclipse is about. And I was glad to be able to share with you. It fits in with our narrative of Passover coming up. In particular, you learned about it has to be on a new moon. And so we celebrated Rosh Chodesh as well. And it's always a pleasure to share with all you. Love studying with you. And I hope you're all starting to get ready for Passover. And maybe I'll see some of you on Shabbat even, Bob. I hope Miriam's able to make it. Okay. All right. Take care, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.